chat room, let us know where you're tuning in from. So give us a city or a country, whatever you're comfortable with. I just love to see where people are joining us from. I should say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe good night for some of you, depending on where you might be. But again, we'll just give everyone a minute or two to join us before we get started today. Once again, welcome to the ClearAdmit MBA Essay Insight webinar series. We are thrilled to have you, and I'm so excited about the schools that we're going to get to talk to today as a part of this panel. As always, at the end of our main session today, each of our panelists is going to bounce off into an individual Zoom breakout room so that you can ask them questions. And as a result of that, we're going to ask you to hold your questions during the main part of the session, this first part, until we get into the breakouts. The next question that everyone's going to ask is where are the links to these individual breakout sessions? We will send you the links at the end. The reason we don't send them to you at the beginning is because we want to give our panelists a moment to get set up in their breakouts at the end of the main session. So stay tuned. We'll get you the links when we get to the end of the main session today. Again, thanks everyone for joining us. Please indicate where you're joining us from in the chat if you're willing. Love to see where people are kind of coming from. And I think we can probably get started. Got a couple hundred people who've bounced on here. Wow, the number of locations is always astonishing to me. I just saw Iowa and Mexico City and Madrid and Kenya and Seattle. So whatever time of day it is, I really appreciate you making time to join us. So getting started, I'm Graham. I'm the co-founder of ClearAdmit, and I'm going to moderate today's session. And let's meet our amazing panelists. I'm just going to introduce everyone so that you all know who we're talking with today. So first up, we have Anthony Morris. He's the Assistant Director of Admissions and Scholarship at Cornell's Johnson College of Business. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, thank you so much for having us, Graham. Excited to see so many time zones in here today.
Yeah, it's amazing. Great to have you, Anthony. Next up, we've got Virginie Fougea, who's the Global Director of Admissions at INSEAD. Hi, Virginie.
Hello, Graham. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great to see you again. I always love your background too. It's such a cool, cool background. All right, next up, we've got David Simpson, who is the admissions director for MBA and Master's in Finance degree programs at London Business School. Hey, David.
Hey, Graham. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting us. Looking forward to talking to you all.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you as always. Next up, we've got Megan Lewis, who is the Senior Associate Director for MBA Admissions at the Foster School of Business at the University of Washington. Hi, Megan.
Hello, and I'm in the Suzzallo Library at the UW campus. It's very Harry Potter-esque.
Yes,
I was on campus. Check it out.
That was going to be my next comment. Is that looks like the Harry Potter library? There you go. Next up, we've got Rachel. We need to advance. There we go. Rachel Wilslayer, who's the Associate Director of MBA Admissions at UCLA Anderson. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here and answer all your questions.
Yeah, it's great to have you as well. So let's sort of dive right in, since I know we have a lot of stuff to cover today. Again, I appreciate everyone making time to join us. And I do want to remind all of our attendees that we will, each of our panelists will break out into an individual Zoom session at the end of this main part. So hang on to your questions for the schools because you will be able to have interaction with them at the end. So let's get started. Our first question, which I'm going to ask everyone to sort of chime in on, but we'll start with Anthony, is when do you read the essays in an application? So you pick up somebody's file, or I guess virtually pick it up now. When do you read the essays, and how much time would you typically spend reading a full application?
That's a great question, Graham. Thanks for asking. And I'm sure a lot of candidates are obviously curious what happens afterwards once they've submitted their applications, how long it takes, and how long the admissions committee is spending reading that. For us, the first thing we're going to do is read your academic and work experience background. So we'll see a little bit about some of the information you put in the application, including your transcripts, your resume as well. Obviously, from that, we'll see your resume as well, work experience resume and all that fun stuff. So with that being said, we'll usually review your essays shortly after that. That way we have a frame of reference as we're moving forward. Obviously, it makes it a little bit easier to see where you're coming from when you're talking about your goals, how you're looking to make impact in our program in particular, as we read some of those things. So it's good for us to have that frame of reference firsthand. How long do we typically spend reading an application? For us, it's about 30 minutes or so, give or take. And that's not a one-size-fits-all approach either. Sometimes it could be more, sometimes it could be a little bit less, but traditionally about 30 minutes. Sometimes if a candidate has maybe a more niche situation or a lot more moving parts than others, or different things they're explaining in an optional essay, we'll take time to connect the dots there too, and it takes a little bit longer, but usually about 30 minutes or so.
Okay, excellent. Appreciate you kind of shedding light there. One thing I want to just mention to everyone who's tuned in, when Anthony says 30 minutes, keep in mind, like Anthony's reading your file, but he's just one of usually several people who are going to look at your file. So I know everyone pours their heart and soul to their applications and spends lots of hours, but your file gets multiple reviews. So we're talking about a single review. So nobody panic that hours and hours of your time is distilled to 30 minutes or something. It's really a pretty involved process on the admissions side. Let's move on and talk with Virginie. How do you go about this, Virginie, when you pick up a file, and how much time are you spending overall?
Yeah, and actually, let me come back to your point. It's an excellent point you make, because it's also several people really reading an application. It's not just one person. So that's very interesting as well. I asked my team actually when they read the essays, and there is no consensus. I usually start with the essays. So really at the beginning, once the application is confirmed as complete and we have everything, and including the video interviews as well. So I like to sometimes go back and forth from the essays, and then listening to the video, getting something confirmed, or seeing how the big picture, and then I go back to the essays. And then I'll tend to also go to the GMAT or the GRE and the letter of recommendation towards the end, but that's usually how I go. I also check the CVs, and I will do this sort of back and forth with the CV and the essays as well. So all this usually takes me between 20 and 30 minutes. That's an average. And again, including all the elements. And some of my team members were more towards 40 minutes. And knowing that we have 3 mandatory essays plus the video questions as well, that's on average what we see.
Okay. And you've been doing this a long time, so I could see why it might take you a little less time than some of your peers.
Never know.
All right. So moving right along, David, how about you? How does it work at LBS? Like, when do you read the essays, and how much time are you spending on an app?
I echo everybody's words and say we have a team of people, and it'll be read by multiple staff members. My personal preference is to first read the resume, the CV, and then take a look at the more full job descriptions and job information before moving directly onto the essays. The reason why I choose to do that is to get a context for who you are. So when I'm reading the essay, I know where you kind of come from. And I think it gives me more from the essay when I read it. That's probably quite particular to our essay and how we've structured it, which I know we'll come on to later. So that's the way I prefer to do it. It takes me, same as Virginie, we've both been doing it longer than we'd care to admit, but it'll take me 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes more. Sometimes I'll have to come back to it. I can't decide, and I'll come back, and I might come back days or even weeks later, because we all know, everybody in this group knows just how important this is to you and how much you've put into it, and we take it very seriously. So yeah, it's a very thorough process, and you should feel very confident in what we're all doing.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love MBA admissions, because I think it's one of the more thorough processes when you look at some other professional schools. Like, I think it's a bit more cut and dried and not as holistic. So it's great that MBA admissions works this way. At least for all the applicants here, I think it's a really reassuring thing. So Megan, how about at Foster? How do you all do it? And yeah, when do you read the essays? How much time are you spending?
I think that also depends on the team member. I can really probably only speak for myself, but I do like to get just a little bit from the resume, but I understand the resume a lot more, or it feels like it's couched in a much better real context if I can read the essay and then go back to the resume. So that's my personal preference, especially because I don't have a private industry background myself. And so I find that it gives me a little bit more context for what I'm reading in the resume. And in terms of the amount of time that we spend on it, it really depends. There's kind of a quick glance at the beginning when we first receive the application, then there's a deeper read later on. Anytime that I interview an applicant, I always also take another read at their application before the interview, so that I can make sure I'm focusing my time on the place that's best for both us and the candidate. And then of course, any time a decision's made, there's also a review of the application at that time. So some of these reviews are a quick glance. Some of them are, more of the 30-minute style. It just depends on where we're at and who's looking at your resume for what purpose, or your application for what purpose.
Okay. Yeah, really interesting. I mean, that's a great point, that there might be at different phases of the process, preparing for to interview someone versus, say, just looking at a file when it first arrives. There might be a different approach. So that's great. I'm glad that you've highlighted that. Rachel, how about you? How do things work at Anderson?
Yeah, so definitely similar to what everyone else has been saying. It does depend on the person. So I'd say on average, it's going to be about 30 minutes, kind of like Anthony said, but obviously there can be different things that cause us to look a little bit deeper. And we do also have multiple people reading each application. So when it comes to when I actually read the essay personally, so we have kind of a general profile that we put together of each student or applicant that we review kind of firsthand. And so I look at that sort of general profile, and then I kind of go through the application. I like to read the essay before the resume, just to kind of get a little idea of them outside of putting them into a box of, what's their current role or what's kind of their past in different industries. So I like to sort of have a broad viewpoint of them with that general profile and then diving into the essay. But we have the ability to kind of skip around within the application. So everyone does sort of have their own preference of where they start and where they really dive into. And I usually leave the letters of recommendation for last, just because that's kind of an outsider perspective. So I want to see kind of all the information that's about the student that they've submitted, and then see that last piece.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and some great points here just all across the board about, a number of people reading your file. It does really sound like across the board within any given admissions office, everyone has maybe their own approach, and that's okay, because everyone's still obviously reading and probably there are ways that you're reviewing files and annotating them, et cetera, that are consistent. But I think it's interesting to know. And I feel like if I were applying now, I would be reassured to hear how much time is going into this. So I want to move on to the next segment of this first session. And what we're going to do now is we're going to sort of do a deep dive with each of our panelists on their application essays. And the idea here is we have some slides prepared for each program. So we're going to start with Anthony at Cornell. And basically we have slides with your essay topics. And so your job, Anthony, is to pick a topic. And if you don't see it on this page, if we have another page, I don't know if they're all on this page, if there's an extra slide or not. But if you don't see your question on the first slide, it's probably on a second slide. So just direct us where you want to go and walk us through how you came up with whichever question you want to talk about, and what your team looks for when they're kind of reading a response, as well as any advice that you might have to someone who's just now sitting down, to put pen to paper or keys to, fingers to keyboard, I guess we could say. So take us through this.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much, Graham. We could start here with the goal statement for us as well. With the goal statement, I'll give you a little bit of history here. So 6 years ago, this question and this prompt from us was very open-ended. It sometimes was a little bit ambiguous in the sense that we didn't exactly understand what candidates wanted to do when they come here. Sometimes we still don't. That's okay. That being said, though, now with the prompt the way it is, you can see it's very specific and it's very targeted towards your post-MBA plans. We want to know more specifically about everything you want to do from your short-term goals, your long-term goals, what role you want to be doing in what particular companies, as well as the industry that you're targeting. Now, you don't have to go into super granular detail here, and that doesn't mean that if you commit to this in your essay, that's where you need to recruit and where you need to be post-MBA, obviously. But we want to know that you've at least done your homework and research, and you know why you're pursuing an MBA at that point. This essentially, the next question right under this, you can see it here towards the bottom, it asks why. We do ask also an essay format. It's how is your experience prepared, and encourage you to pursue these goals as a short statement. So that being said, it's about 300 words. Our impact essay, which we'll get to in a minute, is about 350 words. This essentially allows you to expand on why and where you're coming from, and if you're making a career pivot or something else, and lets you expand on everything as far as your goals. Like I said, plans change. That's absolutely normal and part of the process, but you are pursuing an MBA to achieve your goals. You're spending a lot of time and money during this entire process. So we want to make sure that we have the resources available to facilitate your transition into those areas too. So we need to hold up our end of the bargain. That being said, beyond that, ideally focus on your plan A here as advice. You don't necessarily have to go into your backup plan, or like I said, anything that's very granular in the level of detail that you're looking to pursue. We can certainly discuss those things in the interview if we make it that far. So definitely that's our goal statement.
Okay. And so I guess what I'd like to do is a follow-on question for you. First of all, I think this is really interesting, the way that you treat the goals question, and it gets people to really, think this through. And I think the point that you're underlining about how it's not like when they hand you your diploma at graduation, if you're not going into this targeted job role or company, you don't get the diploma. It's really people's goals evolve, but I think it's a really useful exercise for people to think this through. I did want to ask a question about the other essay question, which I think is on slide 2 here. Here we go. So you have this impact essay, as you guys call it. And, this is sort of, looking at how someone intends to make an impact. And one of the things I just wondered was, can the research to write this essay be conducted online, or do people, should candidates really connect with current students or recent graduates to kind of do their sort of, research and whatever primary source research as they prepare to write this? So what's your advice on that?
It's a good question, Graham. I think it can really go both ways for us. It's not as much who you know in the program. It certainly helps to go out and make those connections, whether that be with current students, staff, faculty, alumni, or anybody in between. But in particular, as far as what you know, as far as clubs, organizations, what's a good fit for you in the program? We offer about 80 clubs and organizations. And one of the things that we continuously talk about here in the program, and you're going to hear it as a theme here at Cornell, is us being a small, tight-knit, collaborative community as well. That being said, we want to know how you're going to make impact in that program, because there's plenty of room for you to do that here with us only having 300 students in the class. So that being said, as far as our impact essay, it doesn't necessarily hurt to go out and make those connections. And I'd absolutely encourage you to get that student perspective, get a feel for the culture and what you're getting into here. But it doesn't hurt to do that research online either. Either one of those would be just fine, but ideally both if you're able to. Okay.
Excellent. All right. So appreciate you shedding some light there. Let's move on and talk with Virginie a little bit. Virginie, again, I think we have multiple slides here for you. You can move us to the right one if you wish.
Yep.
So take us through, pick an essay that you want to discuss, and then we can sort of have some follow-on questions too.
Yeah, these ones are job questions. They are not essays. So
these are short.
Yeah, exactly. So on the next slide, you probably have the essays. The real essays. And I think one that would be really interesting to discuss here is the essay number 1, because it's an essay that has been around with INSEAD for a number of years now. We like it. And I'm told by applicants that they like it too. It is a very open question where a lot can fit in, a lot can go in. So people have the freedom to address it in the way they want. And usually applicants nailed it by letting us know who they are, as there's an opportunity also for us to really discover the person behind the application. So we have the video interviews, as I said earlier, we have a number of elements, but with the essays, it's an opportunity for the applicants to do some sort of self-introspection work, and to realize, how did I come here? Why am I like this? And why do I react in this fashion or in this way? Why are these values very important for me? And why is this passion animating me? So this is the sort of things we read in this essay. And typically an effective response is an essay where we find thoughtful, honest, and I even say sometimes meaningful answers. And this is the reason why this essay doesn't need to be perfect in terms of syntax or with fitting a perfect framework. This is perfectly fine for INSEAD to have some sort of A winning essay, I would say, is very genuine, even if there are some clumsy sentences. We realize that only 20% of the students at INSEAD have English as their native language. So we prefer to have a very genuine answer rather than the perfect and a little bit dry or canned answer to this essay. And I would dare saying computer generated essay, and we prefer to have a very genuine answer here. We are looking for individuals who share INSEAD values and vision. That means individuals who have the capacity to catalyze positive change, and that will trickle down across communities, across businesses, and eventually potentially the global society. So this is the sort of things we are looking at. And so I mentioned about this introspection. I mentioned about the contribution that people see themselves making, the impact they see themselves making at INSEAD, as well as potentially in their future company or to the society at large. So that's the sort of elements we find in this essay.
And I just noting the word count for this one is a bit more than the other two, which I guess, you know, as you said, it gives people really a chance to sort of stretch out. One thing I was wondering is, do candidates ever tell you how they go about brainstorming for this? Like, do any candidates go to their, I don't know, friends or even maybe colleagues at work and say, how would you know, what would you say about me? Like as a way to kind of make a list of like things that people are saying as they think through how they want to present.
Good question. Yes, we see people typically going back to people who know them well after they have the first draft. And then having, is that really me that you are seeing in this essay when I describe myself? Is that really me? So yes, they do this sort of cross references or checking with people who know them well. Yes.
Okay, that's great. And yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask you as a kind of short follow-on to another essay, which is the essay about you know, the achievement and the failure. So I just wondered to what extent candidates, maybe have you ever seen candidates who sort of talk about a failure and then use that as like a springboard to share an achievement that sort of come out of failure, you know, so something that they learned that led to success later? Or is it often that people are just talking about two completely different stories in this essay?
We see both. We see both, and that's actually a very good question as well, because people really struggle sometimes deciding. The bottom line here is both are fine, as long as there is some sort of learning. We're not interested so much in hearing about what happened as a success or as a failure, but we're really interested in why was it important? Why did you decide to share this example with us? Because of this learning, or how did that make you grow, or how did you go back if it's an interaction with somebody and there was some friction, or there was some issues, then how did you go back? How did you address the topic, and what did you learn from this situation? This is what is interesting in this essay.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for you know, shedding some light there. Let's move on and talk with David at London Business School. So David, you all have one main essay, and then you do have an optional essay, but I'll let you choose what you want to sort of shed light on for us today. So walk us through, you know, the origin story of the essay and what you're looking for, and any advice you have for people as they approach it.
Sure, thanks, Graham. Yeah, as you spot, we just have one main essay, one compulsory essay. Why? Well, we rationalized down a few years ago to what we need to know. And that's because the essays don't exist in a vacuum. They're part of the fuller application. You don't do one or the other, you've got to do it all. And we figured there's different ways to get the information we need. And that includes later on through the interview. Applicants have enough to do, and especially when you're doing this for 2, 3, 4, 5 schools as well. And as well as the rest of the application, we link up through to the alumni interview that we carry out. I think for us, it being, we're a business education, and this is all about your career. So this question is very practical. and it's all about what you've done, what you hope to do, and how LBS might be there in the middle of all that to help you make those changes. So it's partially to kind of see that you've got the awareness to sort of reflect on what you've done, and have a sensible view of what you hope to do in the future, and the business school can help you to get there. So it's probably on the ambition to realism spectrum of knowing that your goals, your ambitions are big enough, especially after investing everything that you invest into business school education, but also reasonable that it's a change you're likely to be able to make. And we don't want everybody to just give us the company name and job role of what comes next. This is a career question, and you might choose to break that down into short, medium, long term. It's up to you, or just you can interpret the question as you see fit. We don't give advice on how to interpret it. We want you to do that. So yeah, we get quite a lot out of this one practical question.
Yeah. So I guess as a follow-up, I mean, one of the things that I always think about is with many applications, at your peer schools, there's this opportunity for candidates to share the non-professional, the non-goals stuff, right? So outside activities or just interests or intangibles that the candidate feels makes them unique. So where does that sort of fit in? Since, obviously the essay is quite pragmatic, the main essay, but what would be your advice there? Is it coming in some of the video stuff that people are submitting, the interview, or maybe this optional essay? How would you advise people?
So to tell the story of you and what you like doing, there's a question within the application that asks you about your interests. And there's enough space in there to give us a good description. So it's quite it looks like another relatively small question in there, but it's obviously an important one, and it's one for you to really personalize the application. It's not a trick that it's put in there rather than an essay. It just felt to us like it's an appropriate place to put that. And my advice on when you're completing that, telling us about your interests, is to be very honest. Don't overthink it. Don't try and prove that you can do A, B, and C. And here's the evidence from what I'm doing. Just be natural. We'd rather it kind of flowed as here's what I like doing. And don't worry that you have to have achieved certain amounts of things and extracurricular activities and place them here. You can talk about that in your essay. It can be fun facts. It can be what drives you. It can be where you spend your spare time outside of working. So that comes within the application mini questions.
Okay. And do you think that there are circumstances where if an outside activity is significant enough or things have happened that could fit in the optional essay too, or you would kind of recommend people not spill over into the optional essay for that sort of thing?
Yes. So the optional essay is completely your choice. It's optional. However, I kind of see it as a missed opportunity if you don't use it, because we try and save you from having to write tons of stuff. And there's bound to be something you want to tell us outside of compulsory questions. So my advice is use it. I'm not going to penalize you if you don't. It's just, you only get so many chances to impress before we meet you. And when we meet you, it goes in a completely different direction. So yeah, if there's some extracurricular achievements or really important hobbies or things that back up your case for why London Business School is good for you, use the optional essay for that. You don't need to worry about explaining your grades at university, because we have a separate question for that in the application form as well. This really is a chance to tell us what you think counts and what you think we absolutely need to know when considering you.
Okay. Super. All right. Thanks for thanks for that and humoring me on these kind of the minutia, I guess, of the application, but it's really useful, I think, for the applicants to understand that they can use that optional essay. Moving right along, Megan, let's hear from you about Foster. And yeah, I mean, we've got your essays up on screen. I think we also have a second slide with some of the optional stuff that you asked too. So feel free to take us wherever you want. Just would love to hear kind of your thoughts on, the background story and what you're looking for.
Sure. Well, I think like many schools, our first essay, we're really just trying to get at why business school, why now, why Foster, what are your goals? And mostly to make sure that we're a good fit, that we can serve your needs, and also to know that you've done your homework. We figure if you've done your homework in articulating your goals, and those are goals that are realistic and achievable, then that means we can trust that you'll do your homework once in the program as well. We have a very high job placement rate, and so this goals essay is important to us in terms of that realism piece. And of course, we anticipate you're going to have maybe a reach goal, and maybe something in the middle, and then a plan B or a plan C. We always like to see that you're open, even though you know what your talents or interests are or motivations. But quick little warning here, it's a red flag when we see that you maybe have a goal that just does not at all match with what we can provide for you at Foster. So there's my little quick tip there, do your homework. And then the personal resilience essay, this is new for us, so we'll see how it goes this year. But we decided to ask this question because it's something that we were looking for quite a lot in the application already anyway. And largely because despite that very high job placement rate, it takes a lot of work. Most students get many rejections before they get that job offer. That's typical in business school. It can be very stressful, and it can be hard to be one of the top achievers in your environment and then go into a business school environment and suddenly everyone's a top achiever. So we want to know that you're going to, be happy in your business school experience, that you can demonstrate, problem solving and stay motivated, and, be mature about handling failures, because that's part of the learning process, and that you're okay with other people failing around you too as they learn, because it's all a process of, try until you succeed. And this is something that we want to make sure everyone's comfortable with, so that you can admit what you don't know while you're in Foster and be vulnerable, and that will enhance your learning experience. So all of that is sort of wrapped up in that resilience piece. I know that doesn't give you a quick tip for how to answer that essay, but I'm letting you know what we're looking for. I think that many students will, or applicants, many applicants will look at these essay questions as wanting to answer the perfect answer in these essays, but that's not what it's about. Really, it's more about the admissions team looking across the entire application for evidence of what we need to see in order to know that you would be successful at Foster and that you would be happy and that we would be able to meet your needs.
Okay. I did want to go back to the first essay, and just one of the things that's interesting about it for me is there are two things. One is it's a bit longer than a lot of what we would call kind of career goals or MBA, post-MBA plan essays. So I feel like it gives candidates a lot of room to sort of stretch out. But the other thing is that it seems to have this extra component, which is all about these gaps and deficiencies. So some programs might just say, well, what are your goals and how are you going to achieve them or something? But this seems to ask for some additional, reflection. And I'm wondering, what advice do you have there? Like, is it enough for the candidate to sort of outline a gap and then even maybe speak specifically to something they're hoping to do at Foster, like a course they want to take or something that's going to help plug that gap or, sort of improve them in that domain? Or what are you looking for here? Because it is a little bit longer essay and they have time to probably elaborate.
Sure, and thank you for asking. What we really like to see here is that someone's done some research on their goals to understand how they might, be an easy slide into that next career role, or how they might have to work to make it happen. How achievable is it? What goals, or what transferable skills do they have? What skills will they need to work on in the program? This kind of gets around to the why MBA. And again, shows us that you've done your homework. And so you can figure this out by maybe looking at roles you're interested in on LinkedIn and looking at the requirements and seeing what's missing in your current career profile or experience. You can speak with professionals to figure this out. You can speak with our current students to figure out how you might be able to build those skills or experiences while in the program. And that's all just part of making sure that you are going to be happy as a student at Foster, because you know that you are going to come in and have a plan that will help you get where you need to go.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And I'm definitely hearing some recurring themes. I think it was David at LBS who was talking about, you can be ambitious with your goals, but you need to be practical too. And that, there's that sort of nice balance of both that's probably required. Let's move on and talk with Rachel over at UCLA Anderson. Rachel, take us through the origin story and like what you're looking for with respect to one of your essays. And yeah, any advice you have as someone's kind of sitting down to get started on this process.
Yeah, of course. So this essay question is new this year. We actually put a lot of thoughtful time into coming up with it as an admissions team. And so one of the big things we're really kind of pushing towards is this idea of a transformative leader and utilizing the pillars that, UCLA Anderson stands for. So those pillars are think fearlessly, drive change, and share success. So ultimately, it's the idea is that those three pillars are kind of what help create a transformative leader. And obviously, transformative leader is an ambiguous phrase too. It can kind of encompass, what you're looking to do and however you're looking to transform. So definitely, we wanted to highlight that we do believe the ability to persevere is an essential component of effective leadership. And actually, kind of similar to Foster, we are focusing on this idea of perseverance. So, we want an example from your personal or professional life where you demonstrate perseverance to accomplish a goal or milestone. So essentially, we want to learn a little bit more about you outside of just what your resume says and kind of your goals. So just to preface, we do have 2 short answer questions. One of them is about your short-term and long-term goals. And then the other one is why Anderson. So you're going to kind of cover those topics in those short answers. So you don't have to worry about building that into 250 words, because we have heard from a lot of prospective students and applicants that 250 words is not like a lot. And we did that on purpose because it is a talent to be able to be concise and to be able to really kind of be purposeful with your words and what you're choosing to tell us. So I'd say that was kind of our goal with the 250 words. And then we do have that optional essay as well, where you can kind of touch on whatever else you feel you haven't been able to share in the essay or the short answer that you want us to be aware of. So it can be about work gaps, it can be about your educational experience, things like that, or whatever else you see fit.
Yeah. So, I did note that this first essay is new for this year, and it does seem, there's a lot of interesting themes that could come through here. And it's good to know that you have those short answers too, so that you're kind of, as you said, getting the goals and the why Anderson stuff out of the way and leaving a clean slate for someone to really spend all 250 words kind of elaborating on perseverance and that example they're going to give. Do you think that there are instances where one might use the optional essay to kind of further elaborate on some kind of extenuating circumstance that is maybe even related to their perseverance that they describe in the first? Or, I mean, I know it's new for you for this year, so I guess you're going to have to see how it all plays out. But any thoughts there? Or is this more a traditional optional essay where it's like, oh, I have a gap in employment, or my grades weren't as good as they could have been? Or could it be, could the extenuating circumstance be more about like, oh, I had to deal with, socioeconomic issues or, other things, that's the hurdles that people have faced, et cetera?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say the goal is for the optional essay to be kind of that traditional piece of just adding in whatever else you want us to know, essentially. So seeing the extenuating circumstances, it could tie into what you covered in the first essay, but I think it's probably a better use of the words and the time to kind of tell us something new rather than kind of reiterating what was talked about in the first essay. So unless, if there's something that you felt like you really weren't able to cover within those 250 words, then you can sort of relay it into that optional essay.
Mhm.
But I'd say kind of try to wrap up the first essay and then, have that optional essay be something separate.
Okay. All right. Super helpful. I guess now what we're going to do is move into the next part, and it's actually the final part of this main panel. I do want to remind everyone that's tuned in that each of our panelists is going to bounce off into an individual Zoom room. We're going to get you the links to those rooms as we wrap up. We are going to give them the panelists a little bit of time to get into their rooms so that you're not bombarding them instantly with questions, but you will have the opportunity to ask each of our panelists questions. What we're going to do now, though, is just wrap up with what we call our lightning round. And I want to stay with Rachel since she was so patient as we went through the alphabet here. So I'm going to stay with Rachel for this first lightning round question, which is, what's one thing you love about working in MBA admissions at Anderson?
Yeah, so honestly, I think it's that we have such a diverse and interesting group of students. And so I'm talking to people constantly from all types of backgrounds, whether that's, where they grew up, what country they're from, what industry they've been a part of. Sometimes it's not even business related at all. So I just feel like I'm always able to interact with really interesting, complex people that we're excited to, add that diversity to our program. So I'd say that's my favorite part.
Yeah, really well said. I mean, I cannot say enough that I used to read files at a business school too, and it's yeah, it's just really fascinating. The things you learn about cultures, industries, roles. I mean, it's like a crash course in the world. Kind of you just learn so much doing it. So I can understand that being a favorite part. Megan, how about you? What's one thing that you love about working admissions at Foster?
There are quite a few prospective students I speak with who have big ideas about solving, major socioeconomic or environmental problems through business. And they're bringing ideas and they've done some research and they want to get their MBA and work on those. And that's very inspiring for me.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, David? Anything that jumps to mind? I mean, you've been at LBS for a little while, so you must like it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place. I'm very fortunate to do the job I do. I think hearing fascinating stories from diverse lives, I learn something new every day, and I mean it. I love every interview, reading applications. I get excited when September comes around, we start reading again, even though we've only just finished reading last year. You have to be a bit of an addict to really get into this job, I think. But I'm just proud to help create the future community of LBS. We think that we are helping to select future alumni rather than selecting students. And with that mantra, we are very careful about what we do and very responsible to the thousands of applicants who want to join us.
Got it. All right. Virginie, how about you? I guess you don't really get as much of a break because you guys have 2 intakes. So you're kind of reading.
True.
Year
True. I would say it's no day is the same. You come into the office, you don't know what will happen, but you do know you're going to be surprised one way or the other. You were not expecting somebody to ask you for a deferral. Well, you get a deferral on your desk, we craft classes very carefully, and all of a sudden you realize, I will need to bring on more people the last minute, or I will not need to go. But whatever, I have forecast models, I have crystal balls, I have whatever. It never predicts the reality. So I love to be challenged all the time.
Yeah, excellent. Anthony, I know it's hard to go last on these kinds of questions, but what about you? What do you love working about working in admissions at Johnson?
Yeah, I think similar to everybody else on the call today, Graham, it's really working with the students. It's always so exciting. And I know we're approaching that time of the year for most of us where students are getting ready to come back on campus, and we're in August now. It's hard to believe, but seeing everybody come in, build those relationships. Us in particular in Ithaca, we're in a very, very small town. It's about 4 hours driving north of New York City, if you know where that's at. So that being said, you really have to go out and make your own fun for what that's worth. So it really lends itself to going out and creating and fostering a lot of those good relationships. And that's always fun to see from the students.
Yeah, and it's 4 hours north of New York, and it's also on a hill, which I learned maybe the hard way because I had a meeting on campus and I parked down below in the main part, and I was like, oh, I'll just walk right up to the campus, but it was uphill. So it's really beautiful setting when you're up on the campus. If it's, no, it's really, really great. So let's stay with you though, Anthony, because we have another lightning round question. And this one is, I know we've talked at length about essays today, but I just wondered if each of you would be willing to give us one piece of non-essay advice for applicants that are interested in your program. So we'll start with you, Anthony.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, there's so much advice out there already, but I think for us in particular, sometimes as a candidate going through this process, it's easy to look at maybe everybody that's on this webinar today and think, that's admissions, I should be really careful with how I communicate to them, or et cetera, but we're really just here to help you and put your best foot forward, whether that be in your essays or otherwise in your application. Don't hesitate to reach out if it's for a phone call or an email. If there's something that's not clear to you throughout the entire process, or maybe something you want to learn more about, and you need help finding those resources, let us know. It's what we're here for, and don't be shy about doing that. That's absolutely why all of us are here.
Okay, excellent. Virginie, how about you? One piece of non-essay advice.
talk to your recommenders. Explain why you want to pursue an MBA, why in this specific school, or if you have several schools, why. I think this is important for them to create a very helpful letter of recommendation and send us insightful letter of recommendation. It's always a missed opportunity when we read, I cannot comment on this in the letter of recommendation. I feel, oh, this is really this is a pity more than anything else. So talk to your recommenders, send them the link early on. Don't wait for the last minute for the deadline and give them 48 hours to submit the recommendation. That's not fair on them, and that's not fair on you.
Yeah, that is fantastic advice. I mean, I could not agree more. And I think sometimes when you're writing the essays and working on every other aspect of the application, you feel the sense of relief that, oh, for the recommendations, I just have to put in the name of my recommender and their email address, and then I'm done, but you really need to talk to your recommenders. So great advice, Virginie. David, how about you? One piece of non-essay advice.
I guess I'd just say be consistent through all the different sections of the application, because we're going to look at the holistic set of information. So your essay, your application, through to your interview has to be the same you that you're presenting each time. So that authenticity and speaking with your own voice, for sure. Ask for help in preparation and reading through stuff, but all of it needs to be you. And that's one of the things we look for. We want to see the full picture, the full story, and we'll compare the pieces and think, is this consistent? Is it inconsistent? Who is this person? What are they trying to tell us? So it has to be a very honest process throughout.
Yeah, I think it was a week ago or maybe 2 weeks ago, this subject came up around not having the admissions committee have to play detective as they go through your different pieces of the file and be like, wait, on the resume it says this, in the essay it seems like it could be that, like what's going on here? Because you don't want, as we talked about at the beginning, the admissions readers spend anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes or so reading a file. If they have to spend a lot of those minutes like figuring out what the heck is going on, that's not good time spent. So you should make it clear for them.
Yeah.
All right, so Megan, how about you? One piece of non-essay advice.
I would say give especially your resume, but maybe even your application to your grandmother, or as someone who just works outside of your industry, and make sure that the industry jargon is toned down or accessible for people that work outside of your industry so they can appreciate your accomplishments.
Great advice too. Yeah, avoid jargon, acronyms, terms that no one is familiar with who's not in your industry. Especially I find, finance, tech, some of those domains or even the military, sometimes it gets very complicated. So keep that in mind. Rachel, how about you? One piece of non-essay advice.
Yeah, I would say any program that you're interested in, find ways to connect with current students. So I think it's really valuable to get insight from them. And, depending on the student, sometimes they're willing to kind of share advice from the application process as they went through it. So, I'd say definitely connect with them. And then also that's a good way to kind of get a sense of the community, of the culture of each program. Every school has amazing programs, but sometimes it's, what's the community that you connect with most on a personal level. So definitely connect with those students.
Great advice, especially given that you went last. Like I was kind of worried as we got, through, it gets harder and harder to come up with some great tip. So thanks for sharing that. We'll stay with you, Rachel, for our last lightning round question. And we kind of, we always do this. We sort of pick a school's essay question, and, INSEAD has a question that we didn't talk about at length in this session, but there's a question about an outside activity. So Rachel, what's an outside activity that you enjoy and how does it enrich you?
I'd say I actually play on a rec softball team with some friends, and we play once a week. And I grew up playing a lot of sports. And then I feel like once you become an adult and you're working, you sort of move away from some of those extracurriculars. And so I naturally am a competitive person, and I find it really fun to once a week kind of let loose, go run around with friends, and be a little competitive. So that's
Nice.
my activity.
And I'm guessing that in Los Angeles, you can probably do this year round, unlike in, where I'm from.
Yes. Yeah.
So
The
that's nice.
seasons are consistent.
Yes. Excellent. Megan, how about you? Something that you do outside of work that you enjoy? And yeah.
Oh, I was thinking about paddleboarding. I thought it was a funny thing to do that I sort of made fun of whenever people um, first started paddleboarding because it was so trendy. But then I tried it and I got hooked. So I think it enriches me because I am just a much better person when I'm more calm and I can think straight and make good decisions. And I feel like being out on the water all day, you get exercise without even realizing it. And good core stability. And so it's good for my health, it's good for my brain. And I feel like I come off of the water being in a much more relaxed state, I guess.
Nice. All right. David, you're up.
So for me, we've spoken before, but the music is my passion. So going to gigs, live performances, generally in London, gives me so many choices, and the only decision really is time and energy. So it reinvigorates me. You know, it's the thing that stuck with me coming out of COVID. It seems like years ago now, but the first gig I went to after that was just kind of almost felt life-changing. So for me, music's the passion, and I just completely forget the world and get into the music. So I love it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Personally, it's one of my favorite things to do too. Virginie, how about you? What's something that you enjoy outside of work, and how does it enrich you? This is unfair because you probably, you know, in your office, you're probably always talking about this because it's your essay question, but let's see what you have here.
No, I'm a big horse rider, so I enjoy going. I ride once a week or so, and I do like that it's also full of surprises. For some reason, it's never the same with an animal, and with a big animal like a horse. I like the fact that it's surprising, and also the fact that it's keeping me exercise, it's keeping me outdoor. And we have the beautiful forest, Fontainebleau, just outside. So that's the reason why I like this, and it's enriching me.
Excellent. Yeah, great location for it, I guess, in Fontainebleau too. So, all right. So, Anthony, how about you? What's an outside activity that you enjoy, and how does it enrich you?
Yeah, Graham, speaking of being outdoors, next time you're up here, I promise we'll get you a parking spot up on the top of the hill. But
Excellent.
Themselves over to a lot of great nature nearby campus. Ithaca is home to 150 waterfalls just within 10 minutes of the city. So we're really fortunate to have that out here. Similar to what someone was saying earlier, I think it was Megan, in regards to water and how it has that effect of being very calming and relaxing. We're fortunate to have so many of those hangout spots both on and off campus for us. So definitely going out and seeing the waterfalls.
All right, excellent. So what we're going to do now is I do want to sincerely thank Anthony, Virginie, David, Megan, and Rachel for all of your time today. So each of our panelists is going to bounce off and get settled into their own Zoom breakout rooms. And we're going to give them a minute or two, and then we'll give all of you, the attendees, links to join them. So let's thank our panelists. I really appreciated all of you making time today, this morning, this afternoon, this evening, I guess, for those of you in Europe. So pleasure hosting this, and yeah, we'll send you off now into your breakouts, but thanks for making time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, so while our panelists jump off and get situated in their breakouts, I just want to talk everyone through a couple of things. We do need to give them a minute. Also, if you're joining the LBS breakout, I'm going to be co-hosting that one with David just to help him out a little bit. So you may end up in a waiting room at first because I'm still here and I haven't opened up that room yet. But anyway, what I did want to talk about just briefly is why it makes sense to register at clearadmit.com. It's free to register. You don't have to give us a ton of information, but it gives you access to all these free tools and just admissions advice. And ClearAdmit Plus includes, you know, there's our Admissions Academy, which is a series of 25 short videos that I recorded with my colleague, Alex Brown, who I host the weekly ClearAdmit podcast with. And we've basically broken down every aspect of the application process to top MBA programs. Again, this is just free. If you've registered, you can go and watch these videos, and they're quite helpful. We also give you access to a data dashboard. As many of you know, ClearAdmit for many, many years now has been gathering data on admissions outcomes. And so we have a data dashboard that has like 60,000 data points in it from candidates like you who've been through the process. So you can kind of get a feel for what sort of GPAs and test scores are making the cut at some of these schools. We also do a private webinar series the first Monday of every month. If you register and are kind of a registered member of the Clear Admit community, you can join those webinars. The next one is actually next Monday at noon Eastern. And then finally, there are a whole bunch of publications that we offer and sort of strategy guides about recommendation letters, how to make your resume for business school, all these other great guides that are free to anyone who's registered on our site. So if you haven't done it yet, this is one of those rare instances, and I'm kind of a cynic about all this. This is one of those rare instances where joining our community is totally free and makes absolute sense. Unlike other sites out there where you sign up for something, you get an email every day and no real benefit. So please join our community. It's meant to be a really supportive community. We really believe in the power of management education. So definitely come and hang out with us on the site. We're going to get the links out to you shortly. One last thing I wanted to mention is that if you go on our website, you can also use a tool that we have that's called ApplyWire, where you can put in the schools you're thinking of applying to, a little bit about your background, and get some free feedback on your candidacy. And sometimes you can get selected for our podcast where we feature a real candidate. So check that out too. We're going to post the links in the chat. One thing I wanted to mention as well is that copy these links and put them somewhere, because if you want to go chat with, say, Foster, and then bounce over and have a conversation with Rachel from UCLA Anderson, you're going to need to keep them because you can only be in one room at a time. We'll also email each of you the links. So you should have in your inboxes shortly an email with these links. So I'm going to set you all free now to go off and chat with Anthony, Virginie, David, Rachel, and Megan. I really want to say thank you to everyone. We've been doing this for 4 weeks in a row. So especially those of you who've joined us multiple weeks, really appreciate your time and all that you do for the Clear Admit community. It's been a pleasure to host these. And yeah, hopefully we'll see a lot of you on Monday of next week for our first Clear Admit Plus webinar. And again, it's free if you register on our site. So hope to see you there. And thanks again, everyone.